Gadens hosted the FinTech meetup on Wednesday evening this week. We had a great turnout with about 100 plus people, anywhere from venture capitalists to FinTech startups to even the Commissioner of ASIC turned up, which was great. The panellists, Toby Heap, Craig Blair and Hilary Ray, raised some really interesting points and took us through all sorts of information about venture capitalists, fundraising and how startups go about getting money, some of the legal issues, compliance issues and regulatory issues. Some of the key points made were around the size of the startup and matching your method of fundraising to the size and your objectives of your startup. So the startups with only a couple of people who are fairly early on, perhaps around the seed stage, they might look to family and friends for fundraising, or they might not worry too much about venture capitalists and other more complex products. But as the business grows, they need to be aware of the options available to them and the implications of those options. For example, if they want to run a managed investment scheme or some other kind of complex scheme to try and get funds, then they need to be aware of Australian Financial Services Licence obligations and other Corporations Act obligations. Hilary Ray also made the interesting point that as soon as you do form a company, even though it's a fairly easy thing to do, you've suddenly got Corporations Act and Directors' Duties obligations. So you need to be aware of all of these things. That's probably one of the key issues that our clients face from day to day, understanding their full range of obligations. Could be anything from Corporations Act obligations to Australian credit licensing obligations, even understanding how the Privacy Act impacts them. One of the other points made was around trust. So the question was raised of, are all of these regulations necessary, and why doesn't the regulator reduce some regulation and some burden on these startups? And the regulator really pointed out the fact that it's important to have trust in our financial services arrangements, and at the end of the day, consumers are not going to be able to invest with confidence if they don't have this kind of protection around them. Some of the other points to think about from the perspective of fundraising are around understanding shares and understanding the implications of the various classes of shares. And it's always a good idea to get some legal advice at the start, even though you don't think, or you might not think, that it's important when you are small. It can have an impact on what happens as you grow.